So last week we had Engineer Dean Campis, a graduate assistant to the Department of Mechatronics Engineering, Putmina, um, gave us a wonderful session, and he's here today to continue with that session. So please, Engineer Dinka.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone once again and thank you for having me here. Again, today I'll be using my phone. We have power issue here, so my system could barely hold charge. So please just permit me to use my phone. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so I'll start sharing my screen now. Please confirm that you can see my screen and probably it's readable enough.
Yes, you can see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. So today we continue from where we stopped the last time. We are basically looking at strategies for writing literature review in this webinar. And last week we laid the foundation of how do you do research in 21st century and what is the role or the importance of literature review. Um, Also, that last week we started out with steps for writing your literature review, where I told you that we basically have 5 that we'll be covering in this workshop. We have planning your research, reading and research, analyzing, drafting, and finally revising. So in last week we looked at planning your research and reading. So we look at where you can look for literature to read and how you can download the literature to read. So today we'll be looking at analyzing. So the goal of the workshop generally is to help you understand the purpose and basic requirement of an effective literature review, which we did last week, and to help you critically assess research material. So we did that a bit. We'll continue doing that today. To develop strategies for inventing, organizing, drafting a literature review. So that is what will be the focus of our talk today. And of course, to also see a bit of how to cite your sources appropriately. Okay, so we look at analyzing. So once again, basically 2 things we'll be covering today. 2 broad topics we'll be covering today is analyzing and drafting. So by the end of today, you should be able to know how to read and analyze a piece of literature and then how to start drafting your own research. Your own literature review by the end of today. All right. So analyzing, how do I assess an existing research? How do I assess? How do I critique? How do I relate with it? Okay. So in analyzing sources, we do that basically in 2 levels: individual sources and as a body of research. That means that when you pick a literature, you can analyze that literature on its own, or you can do that in relation with other research works that has been published in that area. In the area where you are concerned. All right. And the task for analyzing literature are the following: summarizing, synthesizing, criticizing, and comparing. So we look at each of these in depth. Our focus will be on how do you be able to do each of these tasks. You can carry them all on a piece of literature in your task of literature review. You can carry all of them out. You can carry them out in 2. You can carry them out, let's say, individually. So let's look at them. So we start with summarizing and synthesizing. The 2 of them are similar tasks. That's why we group them together to just look at it. So the goal is that in your own word, you are able to summarize and or synthesize the key finding relevant to your study. So Again, let us not forget the reason for doing literature review, probably in your own thesis, or you want to write a paper, or you want to apply for a grant, scholarship grant, and so on. So, relating to what you want to do, you could summarize or synthesize key and relevant findings to your own assignment as it may appeal to you. All right, so what are the questions to ask? The questions is, what do we know about the immediate area? What are the key arguments or key characteristics or key concepts or key figures in this area of research? What are the existing debates or theories? What are common methodologies that are used? So now, we're not talking about drafting now, don't forget. We're looking at how do you analyze. So you have a piece of literature in your front. What are the questions that you ask yourself, that you seek answer to when you are reading this paper? That is what this section is about. So these are the questions that you have in your mind. So when you are reading, you try to find answers to this argument. And so for instance, what do we know about the immediate area? So that can be answered by considering the introduction of a particular paper that you're looking at. What are the key arguments, characteristics, key concepts, or key figures? Even existing debates and theories all can be answered by considering the literature review presented by that paper. Then you can now look at its own methodology and even the methodologies that are presented in the literature review to answer all these questions. So with a single paper, you can answer all these questions, but at the same time, by looking broadly at a lot of papers that you have downloaded, you can organize them and you can organize them together to see how you can answer these questions. We'll talk further on organizing your papers as we go on. All right. So what are the languages that you can use for summary and synthesizing? So you can say Nomadin, that's an author, has demonstrated. So that's the language for summary and synthesizing. Early works by the three authors was concerned with Elsey and Stern compare algorithm for handling. So these are different ways that you can, those are the languages that you use in summarizing and synthesizing a piece of research. All right, an example is this. Under the restriction of small population, 4 possible ways to avoid premature convergence were presented. The first one is to revise the gene operator. Griffins and Miles apply advanced 2-dimensional gene operator to search the optimal cross-section of a beam and significantly improve result. The second way is to adjust. So what I want to point out here is that, you see, he summarized first by telling you that there are 4 possible ways to doing this. Now, you see, he's not considering a single research, rather a body of research. So he mentioned the first one and then tell you who are the people that have applied it. Then he go ahead and tell you about the second one and the people that have done it. So that's how he will go on to mention all of that. So this is summarizing and synthesizing at the same time. All right. Yeah, this is another example. We have Piaget's theory of stages of cognitive development and Erikson's stages of psychosocial development are commonly used for educational psychology courses. Now, look at that. That is talking generally on what do we know thus far in this field. Then he cites sources where this statement that he used can be found or could have been applied. I hope we get what that means. All right. So then he went ahead and then Piaget described characteristics behavior, including artistic ones such as drawing as evidence and how children think and what children do as they progress beyond developmental milestone into thought and so on. All right. So this one is not just synthesizing now, but it's also summarizing what we know thus far as a body of knowledge in this particular problem. All right, so let's look at the second one, task to do when you are analyzing the literature. That is comparison and criticizing. All right, so you have the major aim is to evaluate the strength and weaknesses of the work. Evaluate the strength and the weaknesses of the work. Please, I hope you can still hear me. Are you following? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So how do you compare? How do you compare? By asking the following question. How do the different studies relate? What is new, different, or controversial? Don't forget, this is analyzing. When you are reading the paper, this is how to analyze. What field needs further testing? What evidence is lacking, inconclusive, contradicting, or too limited? What research design or method seems unsatisfactory? So all these things will be what you ask yourself or what you seek answers to as you consider the body of literature that you want to read. All right. Now, what I mean by body of literature is you may probably download like 40 papers you want to read. I don't usually give people the number of papers they need to read. I think it depends on you and your supervisor, or it also depends on the work you're doing, right? So, but say you download 20 papers or 40, you can answer this question now by comparing these 40 papers that you have downloaded and answer this question as you are reading them. All right. So in reporting, the language you use now is, in this ambiguous but flawed study, that is a criticizing language. This general result reflecting the stochastic nature of flow of goods are similar, that is a comparison language. All right. So we have an example, I don't know, maybe it's one or two. The critical response to poetry of Fields Whitley often register disappointment or surprise. Some critics have complained that the first of these African American slaves is insecure, imitative, and incapacitated. At worst, the product of white man mind. Others, in contrast, have applauded Whitley's critiques of Anglo-American discourse. So this piece now is showing you how you can look at a body of research that you have, a body of literature that you have considered, that you have read, and then bring out a strong claim out of it by comparison and criticizing at the same time, right? Okay, this is another one. The situationist model has also received its share of criticism. One of the most frequently cited shortcomings of this approach centers around the assumption that the individual entered the work context tabula rasa. So this again is criticizing a body of knowledge that you have read. So in this case now, you can bring in different sources to support your claim. Bringing in different sources, by citing them. All right. Okay, so these are the adjectives that you may use in doing that. I have already sent this slide so you can consider them individually. So putting it all together in your analysis, once you have summarized, synthesized, compare, and critique your chosen material, you may consider whether these studies demonstrate the topic's chronological event, show different approaches to the problem, show an ongoing debate, center on a seminal study or studies, demonstrate a paradigm shift. So this, what you have done in analyzing can now set you in order for drafting your paper. I gave a talk at Summit University where I consider different types of literature review that you may do. So you have chronological literature review or state-of-the-art literature review. You have expert review, you have strategic review, and all of these have different things that that they need to address. Okay, so but in analyzing your own review, in your own analysis, then you can come up and say, yeah, I guess I can write a strategic review from this analysis that I have done, or from this analysis I have done, I think I should be able to show the state of the art research in this area, and so on and so forth. All right, please, is there any question? Okay, let me take this last slide. Okay, so once you have done that, then you can ask yourself the following question. I mean, you can answer the following question: what do researchers know about this field? Remember, you have read, you have analyzed your reading, you have categorized them, sort of digest what you have read. Now you can ask, I mean, you can be able to answer, okay, from everything I have known, everything I've read in this field now, what do I think the researchers know? What are the things that researchers do not know? I mean, what are the limitations in the literature? What are the gaps that have not been explored? What are the flaws in some of this research? Why has nobody answered for this flaw? That's what that point is saying. And thirdly, why should we further study this topic? Right? And then what will my study contribute? All right. So this especially is necessary for people who are going to postgraduate studies. I don't know, even undergraduates can sit down and do this, just that sometimes undergraduate doesn't have enough time to conduct this kind of in-depth research, right? But for postgraduate, I'm talking of masters and PhD. In fact, before you start doing your seminar, you should be able to answer this. And if you're able to answer this question from your literature, you discover that your seminar work, I mean, you do it comfortably, and you won't have any problem in your seminar work. All right. Okay. So let me pause a little bit. Analyzing is very short, but drafting will be a bit long. But if there's any one or two questions that I can quickly take on analyzing before we forget, is there any question? Any question on analyzing?
Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or raise your hands and ask questions if you have any.
Okay, so if there's no question, then I think I can move on. So we get to the main task, drafting, right? So what am I going to write? That is the major thing. All right, so as an overview, to help you approach your draft in a manageable fashion, this section we address exigence, that's what is eminent, what do you think is most important, then thesis statement. Now, thesis statement in this case is not talking about your MSc thesis or PhD thesis. Rather, it's talking about position statement. Where do you position yourself, right, when you are writing your own literature? Organization, how do you organize your reading or even your writing? Of course, we've talked about analyzing, but now in organizing, we see different ways you can organize your own writing. Okay, then you have introduction and conclusion. That's how you write introduction and conclusion for your section of literature review. And lastly, citation. All right. Now, thesis statement. Remember, I said thesis is not your MSc thesis or PhD thesis. Rather, it's reversed to the position you take regarding a body of literature. So the thesis statement offers an argument, your own argument about the literature that you have read. It may do so in any of the following or in combination of these of the following. So you may offer an argument and critical assessment of the literature. That is usually done. I mean, this is the most basic that all of us are familiar with. In the works of number one, development of so is presented in Adigbola et al., right? Which says this method was used, this result was got, and that's all, right? That is what many of us are quite familiar with. So it offers an argument and a critical assessment. Now, many of us, the way we do our critical assessment is simply by stating the method and the result they got. But you can go, you can still go a little bit further by presenting your own position. Excuse me. You can present your own position about the method and even the result. So that is why this is the thesis statement, your position, right? Okay. Secondly, you can provide an overview of current scholarly conversation. So you can, of course, you have read wide, you know the direction of scholarly conversation, you know the direction of, the dominant method, the best result, state of the art, and all of that. So you can provide an overview of that, right? Okay, thirdly, you can point out gaps or weaknesses in the literature. Again, most of us are happy to do this number 3. We want to show the weaknesses of what other people have done. Of course, you can do that. That is your position in considering other people's work. Then lastly, you can relate to the literature, relate the literature to a larger aim of your own study. Now, this last statement, this last point is quite important, especially for for postgraduate work, not necessarily PhD. All right, as a postgraduate, you want to show that, one, you are conversant with the literature, and secondly, your literature fits into your work fits into the literature. So you use the body of literature that you have read to justify your own study. That's what the last statement means. All right, so let's see a bit of example. Number 1, we have here, in spite of this difficulty, we believe that pre-service elementary arts teacher and classroom teacher need some knowledge of state theories, children's development, then go on with the review of the theory. So now, what do you see? Number 1, you see that this person is presenting his own assessment of the body of knowledge that he has, that he has read, and then he's also presenting his own opinion that he believes that pre-service elementary art teachers and classroom teachers has some gap in their knowledge and they need to be provided. So you see, maybe this person is working on a project that is related to that kind. Okay. Now, second example here, research on the meaning and experience of home has proliferated over the past 2 decades. Now look at this. This is telling you about some chronological period which he has read about. So, and is presenting it, particularly within the discipline of sociology, anthropology, physiology, human geography, history, blah, 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 right? Many researchers now understand home as a multidimensional concept and acknowledge the presence of a need for multidisciplinary research in the field. Now, again, it is also presenting what he knows as, in context of the larger literature. Now, criticism is now coming in. However, with the exception of 2 exemplary articles, right, few have translated this awareness into genuinely interdisciplinary study of the meaning of home. So now this person is slightly helping us to understand that there is gap in the literature, and probably this is setting the stage for his own work to come in. So this is how you can position, you can write your own position statement as a body of review. Please give me a second. Yes. I'm taking a class. Yes, I'm coming, sir. Thank you.
Don't worry. Later.
Okay, sir.
You can talk.
Okay, sir. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, are you still with me? Hello?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir, we're still with you.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. So now, after you have written your own position, the next thing now is to go properly into organizing the document. Organizing your own thoughts or the body of your paper, right? So we do that under this. I just wish you guys will follow me very well because I know this talk is in depth. So in the process of getting so in depth, I may lost you in the process. That's why I'm taking it carefully a bit. All right, so don't forget, we are looking at drafting. In drafting, we have 4 things to talk about. We have position, that's thesis statement. We have organization. We have how to write introduction and conclusion, and how to cite. So we are looking at organizing your paper right now. So in organizing your paper, we look at the following. The following way you can organize your paper. You can organize it as a topical base, as a distance to close, that's gap in the literature, that's identifying several gaps that exist, in the literature. You can have it as debate. Now, debate is usually for art, psychology, social work, and all of that. Then you can organize it as a chronological, or lastly as a seminar study. Now, for seminar study, this is especially for postgraduate studies. All right. Okay, so let's look at topical. Now, the characteristics of topical is this is the most common approach. So it is traditional. You get to see the development of so is presented in so. The author of this presented this, right? So that is the most common that you see in the literature. It breaks the field into a number of subfields, subject area, and approaches. It discusses each subsection individually, sometimes with criticism of each. Most useful for organizing a large body of literature that does not have 1 or 2 studies that stand out as most important, or as clear, as a clear chronological development. So usually when what this is saying is that a topical actually discuss each subsection individually. Sometimes they discuss each paper individually. This is, like I said, this is the most common that you see. So they discuss each paper individually. If they have to criticize, they criticize each paper individually. And it doesn't really compare, contrast, or anything, right? Okay, so an example, you have 3 important areas of fields that receive attention, which are A, B, C. A has been approached from 2 perspectives, F and G. The most important development in terms of B has been C has also been an important area of study. So that is how this is done. Also, in writing thesis, if memory serves me very well, I think this is almost like the method I use in a way. All right, especially in relating to, as part of my MSc thesis, I have to review the mathematical model. Sorry, I'm a control engineer as my MSc thesis. All right, so I have to consider some mathematical models, and in considering this mathematical model, honestly, I have to consider each one of them individually, even though they relate. So that's topical for you. All right, distance to close is a type of topical organization with studies grouped by their relevance to current research. Start by describing the studies with general similarity to current research that you are doing, and end with studies most relevant to the specific one. All right. So this distance to close is actually showing you, in a way, what are the current research, but at the same time, it's also showing you, is describing the similarity to your current research, and it's also showing the limitation along the way. So what is most different from, what differentiates this from topical is that it's always related back to your own research, right? Okay. Typical language that you find there: method M, slightly similar to current research, you can see. Drawing upon method N, similar to current research, can help, These studies apply the procedure used in model O, similar to current research. So these are the way that you can show distance to close. I read a paper of recent by one of my mentor who worked on a work done by Professor Musa. So the work Professor Musa Ibinu did was a very long time ago, like 2010. And then he's coming up, I think 2016 or 17 or thereabout, that's 7 years later. And he wants to continue from where Professor Musa had stopped. So in that case, the work of Professor Musa will be serving as a basis for him, but at the same time will be something that you want to, like he has a new theory or a new result or a new method, a new method that can improve what someone else has done. So his work will build on what that other person has done as a way of closing the research gap. Okay. Now, debate. I may not be able to speak so much about debate because I've not done so much as an art person. I'm not even an art person, but it's a way of also, it also adds some sort of chronological component, but it emphasizes various stands of research in which proponents of various models openly criticize one another. So in this field of art and humanities and sociology and all of them, what they work on basically are theories. And so they openly criticize the limitation of one theory and argue for the position of a new theory they are bringing. So the way they do their literature review, the way they handle their literature review, most importantly, has to do with debate. I have a cousin in communication and language arts. I've helped him. Okay, one time I attempted to help him read his paper, like his literature review, but I got lost because their method of writing is quite different from us. Whereas in writing the paper, it tends to be conservative. They are very, very actively criticizing other people. So it's not wrong. It's just where they work. All right. So this is just telling you that it is possible to write your literature review using a debate approach. So let's see the language. There have been two distinct approaches to this problem. The first model posits, so you can see now is bringing out a theory. The second model argues that the first model is wrong for 3 reasons. Instead, the second model claims, so you can see the way they go forth and back in writing their own literature review. Now, in chronological, list studies in terms of their chronological development. Again, in postgraduate study, you may find this also very important and very useful, especially in writing your literature review. You can start by showing us the history of the fields that you are working on. Whether this is possible in when you want to publish a paper, yes, it is possible. It's just that it won't go as far back as what every other person, as you would have it in your thesis, right? So the most important thing is that you list the study in terms of chronological development, then you emphasize, it is useful when the field display clear development over a period of time, and then you emphasize actually the most important discovery or development per time. So let me give you an instance. For instance, if your research has to do with Ashia neural network, Ashia neural network has a clear development period. So you could start even as far back as 1950 something, when Rosenblatt was experimenting with his perceptron, and then you can go on and on until you come to the development of backpropagation algorithm in the 1989, and then you can go on even to talk about the AI winter in the 1991 and so on. And then you can go on also even to talk about the reawakening that happened in 1995 when Yann LeCun developed his convolution neural network, and go on also to talk about when convolution neural network come into limelight 2014 by Andrew Krzyzewski, and so on. So you even without reading so much, you can see me telling you this history of artificial neural network because I've been in the field for a while. So the same can go with you, you know, a field that you have been working on, you may be able to write a chronological event of that period. And trust me, it's usually very interesting. Okay, so typical language that you use for chronological, if this subject was first studied by X. So you can see now, in the context of artificial neural network, we know the first person that typically study artificial neural network is Rosenblatt with his perceptron, right? So you can now begin to list the date, why modified or extended or contradicted X work by so thing that he did. So today, research by said represent the current state of the art in the field. So these are different ways that you can present your own language. All right. So lastly, we have the seminar. Seminar is extremely important, especially for postgraduates. The pattern is that when you want to present your seminar work, you start with the most relevant most relevant paper to your own research. So you start with that, and then you now go on ahead to build other patterns that you want to use in organizing your research. So for instance, let's say that somebody is working on solar system, for instance, maybe economic load balancing using solar panel. And then let's further assume that there's somebody work in last year or 2020 that is most relevant to his own. So it will sit down with that paper. It will sit down and discuss that paper in depth, telling us what he did, what method he used, what result he got. Then he will also talk about the limitation, and then also further to talk about the differences between that person's work and his own work. So that is now talking about a work that is most relevant or most closely related to his own work, right? Okay, so a typical language could be the most important research on this topic was studied by X in so year. So when you do that, you tell us that this is the research that your work, that is similar to your work, or that your work is built on, right? If there's also a work that you want to extend, you can also sit down and talk about that, right? And then before you now go ahead and discuss other literature that is available in that area. All right, so that is all about organizing. Don't forget, in organizing, we look at how you can organize your paper when you are writing, right? So we look at topical, distance to close, debate, chronological, and seminar. Okay, so now we move into, again, drafting. Now we move into how do you draft the introduction and conclusion of your paper, right? So how do you draft the introduction and the conclusion? The introduction should indicate the scope of the literature you want to review, and in a way to also provide some background to the topic. Also, don't forget, you are the owner of this research and this is your space. You should use that space, the introduction, to demonstrate the importance or the need for your own research. It is also a point to make your claim and to overview of the ensuing discussion. So introduction is not necessarily more than a paragraph, but then you see a lot of things that you may need to check, right? So in excess, reading the introduction should at least give us a foretaste of what we are going to see by continuing to read your literature review. And at the same time, it should also let us know at that stage, your own claim, your own position about the literature that you want to read. That we are about to read. All right. So example of introduction. There is currently much controversy over how non-human primates understand the behavior of other animate beings. On the other hand, they might simply attend to and recall the specific action of other in particular context, and therefore, when the context reoccur, be able to predict the behavior. On the other hand, they might be able to understand something of the goal or intention of others and thus be able to predict other behavior in a host of novel circumstances. Several lines of evidence and a number of anecdote observation have been adopted on both sides of question. But few studies directly address the question, do non-human primates understand the intention of others? So you can see this is an introduction now. What does this introduction contain? It contains a broad overview of the field, and then it presents a question that probably his own research is going to build on. So that is how a literature is done. So what about conclusion? Now, don't forget, I think I need to be explicit now. Introduction will come before you present your literature. Then you write introduction, you write your own literature, everything you have written in the literature. And then finally, you have the conclusion. So in conclusion, what do you write? You summarize the main finding of your review. Some people use tabular approach where they have the author, the reference, the method he used, the weakness, the strength, and I don't know. Yeah, it could be as that. Some could list different methods that are used, and then they will tick different method that that paper consider or that doesn't consider, right? So, but in any way, you should be able to present a summary of your finding. You should be able to provide a closure, that is a closing statement, and you should be able to answer the question, okay, this literature that I have presented, what does it explain thus far? That's as also drawing the significance of your literature review. Okay, it should also present an implication for the future research or a connection to your current study. So that's very important. So an example is this. In summary, although there is some suggestive evidence that chimpanzees may understand others' intention, we look at an introduction that's similar to this conclusion, right? Okay, maybe understand others' intention. There are also negative findings like Powell and a host of alternative explanation. As a consequence, currently it is not clear whether chimpanzee or non-human primates distinguish between intentional and accidental action performed by others. In contrast, there are several studies indicating that children as young as 14 months of age have some understanding of others' intention, but lack the comparative studies but the lack of comparative study make it difficult to know how children compare to ape. This study is the first to directly compare children chimpanzee and orangutans with the use of non-verbal tasking, in which the subjects were to discriminate between the experimental's intention and accidental action. So you can see, what do we see from this conclusion? This conclusion presents a summary of what he has read, what he has written about. Then he also presents two dominant arguments about those that believe primates can understand and those that believe that primates cannot understand. And then he also shows for us a gap that exists. Said, but the lack of comparative study make it difficult to know how children compares to ape. So that is now showing you the gap. And then because he has identified the gap, he can then bring in his own study. So this study is the first to directly compare, so showing the novelty, showing the gap that he is closing, and also introducing his own work. All right, I believe that's quite clear. Okay, so lastly, in drafting, I mean, yes, in drafting, we talk about citing your sources. In citing your sources, I will not really be going into how do you cite using IEEE or APA format, because there's so many referencing styles out there. Now, what I can say is that it is much better that you use citation manager like EndNote, Mendeley. I find Mendeley very, very useful. And if you are very conversant or very good with using LaTeX, I think LaTeX will be even the easiest. But if you don't know how to use LaTeX, I guess you find Mendeley quite interesting. Mendeley is a reference manager. You can also read with it and make notes on it, and it also has a plugin to Microsoft. So every paper you have in your Mendeley in your Mendeley library can be directly referenced in Microsoft Word. And with a single click, you can change the referencing style, whether from IEEE to APA to MLE, Chicago, every other ones that exist out there. Now, but what we will be looking at is how do you present your own idea as different from others, right? Okay. Now, in citing your sources, the most important is paraphrasing. You should paraphrase key idea, avoid copy and paste, right? I don't think in this age anybody should be unaware of plagiarism, and so nobody should fall a victim of plagiarism. Now, as simple as writing postgraduate personal statement and research statement and all, as simple as that, they are now applying plagiarism checker. So you don't want to copy and paste. You don't want to state verbatim somebody else's work. Rather, you want to paraphrase. So use paraphrasing. Now, don't use quotation except in rare case. Now, what are the rare cases that you may use quotation? When there is a definition of term. For instance, let's say there's a field that you are working on that have not had a generally agreed definition. So that there is different people's opinion or definition of that particular field. So you can quote you can quote an author's definition and say, yeah, I think I am comfortable with this kind of definition. Let me give you an example. I am currently working on a paper on digital twin. Digital twin is relatively new. I mean, by saying relatively new, I'm talking about a development of 10 years maximum. So up till now, there's no generally agreed on definition for digital twin. The definition that exists is either defining it as related to simulation, aircraft simulation, NASA sending people to their space mission and all. But then there are some that are now sitting down now and are giving some sort of comprehensive definition. So in that case, should I want to write my own definition? Of course, it's not my definition. Rather, I'm going to quote somebody's definition and then explain different key terms in that definition. So in that case now, you can quote, but don't quote. Now, when you are introducing quotes, of course, let it be efficiently done. Use proper in-text citation. Of course, proper in-text citation is talking about the referencing style that you may use. Some will use first name and year. Some will tell you that number is sufficient. Some use only footnotes, subscript or superscript. Anyone that they use, please just stick with it and maintain accurate bibliography record. That's keep your source very well. Keep the citation of every paper that you use. And that's why I said that you should use reference managers like EndNote, Mendeley, or if you use LaTeX, use bibliography of LaTeX. Okay. Now, things to avoid: plagiarism. we cannot talk enough of plagiarism. Please avoid plagiarism, right? Avoid irrelevant quotation. Also, avoid unintroduced quotation. Unintroduced quotation usually comes in where somebody just mistakenly starts a quotation but never end it, or end a quotation that never starts, right? And some people also could unwittingly just quote a particular word. For instance, they may quote style. I mean, if it is not necessary, you don't need to quote anything, right? So avoid that. Okay, yeah, so let's see two examples. Now, this is a direct quote. The first one is a direct quote, and the second one is a paraphrase. A direct quote: despite pleasant depiction of home life in art, the fact remains that for most 7th century Dutch women, the home represents a curtailment of some degree of independence. Art historian Ludrian Dixon writes that, I'll see the Faber quotation, for the majority of women, however, home was a prison, though a prison made bearable by love and approval. Now, this quotation is not needed. You don't have to quote this person. Rather, you can rewrite it in your own way. So I'm just going to jump to that. Art historian, that's in paraphrasing now, art historian Dorinda Dixon argues that the home actually imprisoned most women. She adds that this prison was made attractive by three things: the prescription of doctors by the day against idleness, the praise given diligent housewives, and the romantic idea based on love and respect. So, can you see how this person has managed to paraphrase the same thing that the other one was quoting verbatim? All right, so avoid quotation as much as possible. It doesn't make your work beautiful. Rather, you can paraphrase and state your own source as well. All right, so basically that ends today's discussion. In next week, we will be looking at two things: how do you revise your written literature, and how do you publish the literature? So that is the two things that we'll be looking at next week as we draw curtain for the seminar. All right, so I want to pause here for question. Thank you. Moderator, I think I should hand over to you to coordinate.
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Dinka, for delivering another beautiful session of it. Please, do we have any questions from the... Okay, I believe there are no questions. Okay, we have one raised hand. Aliu Hussein, please ask your question.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Deinka.
Good morning, sir.
And thanks for the wonderful presentation. But looking at today's session, I actually enjoyed the presentation, but I don't know if it's possible if we can actually take it a bit more practical, because I feel like some of us might still be struggling to understand some of these terminology. So if it's possible, we can actually do something together. So let's like come up with something. Let's see if we can actually do it together to further assist our comprehension of the topic discussed today. So that's my first observation. As regards the question, I think you've actually answered. Last week I said I was going to ask some questions, but I think you've actually answered the questions, almost all the questions in my mind during the course of your presentation. You've addressed almost everything. So unless if I think of any other one I want to ask, maybe I will then come back. So thank you very much for the wonderful job. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aliu. Well, as for the hands-on, I think I will let the organizer answer that question. Right? Mohammed. Miriam.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the question.
Okay.
Would actually appreciate if the speaker would be able to do a hands-on of the session probably next week because he said his laptop is currently not charged and there's power issue. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, well, Mohammed has returned it back to me. Okay, so well, I will see what can be done. I will see what can be done. The reason is that hands-on was really not planned into this workshop. You know, initially when we're planning, we're looking at how to get you guys to do hands-on, looking at probably to encourage you to read paper and then apply some of these things along the way as we are teaching. But according to the organizer, it will be quite difficult to monitor and to evaluate what you guys are doing. So that's why that was dropped. So if I want to do hands-on now, hands-on will be a bit tricky because number one, we are really not we have not picked any area to work on. We've not picked any project to work on. Secondly, we've not read any paper, you know. So there's a considerable number of papers that you should have read before I'll now say, okay, yeah, from what you have read now, let's think of how to analyze this paper that you have read. And then let's see how we can draft a paper from what you have read. So these are my limitations. But then I can look at my own research, papers that I've read, that I've written, or what I have read. And then maybe next week, I'll just show you how some of these things are done. So how I have done some of these things. But bear in mind that it is not everything I told you today that I have done. Remember, I told you that even in organizing, I have not written a paper based on debate. And of course, it may also be quite, okay, I think I can show you from seminar. Maybe that is possible. Yes, that's possible. I can show you from seminar. I have my thesis. So by the grace of God, next week, trust God, there will be light. And if there's no light, I'll put it on my phone. So I'll just show you. So I'll show you from my own research how some of these things can be done. And if you don't mind, really, okay, that's also showing you, because I've shown you with examples. Really, what will have helped you is that if you have a paper that you are reading, you have a problem that you're solving and you have a couple of paper that you are reading along the way, and then we can then apply some of these theories to it. But we'll see how things can be done, especially we work, using the organizer, we may be able to bring out some other things from here. Okay. So thank you very much once again, Mr. Ali.
You're welcome.
Okay, yes, and please do not forget to join the WhatsApp group and engage our social media accounts. That's where you get timely information from, and any updates regarding this hands-on, you should be able to get it from there. We'll drop the social media links in this chat for those of you that are yet to be a part of the group. We have another raised hands, please. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, Ido.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Engineer Yinka, for the presentation so far from in last week. It has been really wonderful and insightful. So my question is, for systematic literature review, in presentation of the results, what platform do you advise to use for that presentation for systematic literature review? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I don't think I fully understand what you mean by presentation of results, sir.
So in analyzing the data from the different literatures
Okay.
and
Okay.
for analyzation.
Okay. Yes, I think I understand now. Okay, so maybe for all of us, a strategic literature review is a review that is done like tailored down towards something, you know. So that's what is asked. So the kind of organization, I mean, analysis that you do in that way will include analysis based on how you get your paper, analysis on their their method or theories that they are presenting, and so on. So his question now is, in presenting their own, I mean, in presenting the result of that kind of strategic review, so how do we properly organize, or which of these organization can someone use? All right, that's a very good one, sir. Thank you. Okay, so personally, I could advise that in your analysis, I mean, in writing, in presenting your results, you could organize based on chronological or distance to close. Now, distance to close will be much insightful for your readers, because for every topic that you present, for every techniques that you present, you will be showing us what are the weaknesses and research gaps that still exist in that field. And for new researchers in that area, when they pick your paper, they know what exactly to do. So your strategic review can be quite insightful, and at the same time, it is showing people what are the what are what are the research gap, what are the what are the research gap or researchable area that still exists in that area. Now, I mentioned chronological. You can do a strategic review that still showcase the chronological achievement of that field as time goes on. In fact, your review can as well show us the state of the art result or the prevailing method in that very area. So it could be very flexible, more than what I have said, but I think you can still apply this organization technique to your strategic review. Thank you, sir. Okay, over to you, Aisha, if there's no other question.
Okay. I believe we have no other question. Thank you once again, Engineer Deinka. Ali, your hands are still raised. Is that from before, or do you have another question?
No, sorry, that was the first one I asked.
Okay, cool. Thank you once again. So I posted the link of our social media on the chat. Please follow and join the WhatsApp group. Thank you once again for attending today's session. See you all next week.
Thank you.